Hola desarrolladores de Latinoamérica, sé lo difícil que puede ser prepararse para tener uma entrevista em inglês. E para os devs brasileiros, eu sei como é desafiante se comunicar com empresas dos Estados Unidos, especialmente em entrevistas técnicas. And that's why I need to switch to English because I want you to succeed in a real world interview. So let's get into it. Just a note before moving forward with this video. This video has been sponsored by Awana, which is a company that allows Latin American developers to find opportunities in the United States with startups and growing companies. For the companies also, it allows them to have a good team of developers that can help them grow over time without the problems of in-house development. So check them out. So as I said, I'm gonna switch to English because from my understanding, you want to get a job in the U.S. So you have to have at least a good level of communication in English. The recommended level it's a B2, according to the standards, the international standards. You can test that yourself, or if you can get like official certification of your level, that's even better. But the main idea is that you should be able to communicate your ideas clearly and to understand a regular conversation. And that's even more important as you go up. If you move from mid-level to a senior level, you're gonna be required to have at least a C1. A C2, I don't think so, unless you're going to a really high level, like something that it needs to have advanced explanations on a scientific level, probably. But it all depends, really. Yeah. But like I said, in most of the jobs, all you need is a B2 level. Okay, so what are we gonna be focusing on? It's how to handle interviews from the technical perspective, what you normally are required to have, and how the whole process goes. So before diving into that, my first point is to have a small introduction into who I am. My name is Ivan. I've been web developer mostly for over 20 years now. I was born in Ecuador, so my main or my primary language is Spanish, but I've been working remotely for startups and companies in the US for around 8 to 9 years now, at least for the time, or by the time I was recording this video. I've been doing a bit of everything from software engineering to managing clients to defining on designing systems. So that's like an overall view of what I can help you with. Continuing with the information, let's jump into this. So the first thing, we were gonna be trying to debunk some of the things that a lot of people in Latin America have in mind when it comes to North American companies. It's not as complicated as you think. That's the first thing. Don't think that what they're doing it's something like rocket science or something that you can't do. If you have a good level of understanding of the core engineering practices, you're going to be able to solve this. There are some things that probably, from my knowledge, are not included in the standard like education in engineering in Latin America, but it's quite easy to fill out those voids, what I'm gonna call it. So let's go through the whole process. The main things that you have to pay attention to when interviewing for an American company. First, focusing on technical problem solving. So it's not only about handling the tools, but knowing when to use them and how to use them. So that's one important point. The other important point comes to, or it's related to clear communication. Okay, so always try to explain fully what you're trying to achieve. One of the things I normally recommend, and it's a good exercise, try explaining complex subjects in that have to do with technical subjects to a non-technical audience. So the basic example I normally give: try to explain this as if I'm your grandpa. For example, try to explain Bitcoin to your grandpa. How would you do that without using the technical terms, but still allowing that person to understand how it works, what it does, how it achieves its purpose? You can start with something easier, like, for example, explaining client and server communication. That's easier. And my regular example in that case, imagine that the server is someone at a restaurant, and it's receiving different requests from different people. And in this case, each people, it's what we have in our hands could be a cell phone, could be a computer. So they are going to be the clients that are requesting things to the server, and every time it goes to the kitchen, it's requesting something to try to get an answer back. What happens if you're having too much people? You are going to have a queue that it's not allowing you to get your response. So that's what happens when you have a website that has a lot of people. So imagine a website with 1 million people. It's going to be like a restaurant with only one door, but 1,000 or hundreds of thousands of clients trying to get their orders. See, that's a way to explain the core concepts of something technical without getting too deep into the technical aspects. So that is something you can practice. Think of different options, different subjects that you can try it on, and repeat that continuously. Why that is important? Because one of the cultural differences that have to do with Latin America in general, with US, we normally in these companies, they have like a flat structure, or they tend to be more direct communication. So it's not uncommon to have the CEO of a company talking to one of the developers, and you need to be able to explain what it's going to be needed, why that can be done, or why it cannot be done, and also connecting that to the terms that have to do with the business. So if we do this, we're going to spend X amount of money, and that's going to make us faster, or that's going to make us slower, and what are the connected things related to that. So that's really important, no matter if you are just or you consider yourself a developer, or that it doesn't require to talk to management. That's going to happen if that's what you want. If you want to work for an American company, that's going to be really important. That's going to be a plus. The other element, the ownership and initiative, has to do with being your own boss to some extent, in terms of being able to stand up for what you have done. Your code, your features are going to be the things that you have to stand for. Okay, and you have to be able to propose things as well. That's if you have come from like a regular company in Latin America, where you expect to get orders from someone, excuse me, and that's not gonna happen in here. It's a different culture. It's way more valued for you to be able to say, hey, I have an idea, I have something that I want to be included in my response, in my work. So that's one of the different things, and it's once again, that's connected to culture, and it's really valued when you're having an interview. So think of that as well. And the last part, it's the culture fit. I have another video that I'm gonna link in the description. It's right now it's only in Spanish, but if that could be only an issue for Portuguese-speaking people, probably. But I'm gonna add subtitles to that, so that you can also follow that in video. The main idea is to understand what are the main differences between the culture in different countries. In this case, if we're talking specifically about the United States and let's say Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, etc. And one of the main things when it comes to cultural differences is you're gonna see that in the video, or you can research a little bit what it means to have a power distance. It's how you relate with your boss, with the people that are on the power positions, and it's gonna be quite different. You have a shorter distance. So I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna speak about that right now because it's a whole different video. But you have to think about how to deal with those differences, because you cannot expect them to say, oh, okay, this guy is from Argentina, I have to work like they do. No, it's the opposite. You, coming from your country, are gonna have to learn how to manage things. Even though you're remote, you're gonna be in your house probably. You're gonna have to adapt to the work culture of that company or that culture, that country in general. Okay, so let's go with the typical interview process that most of the companies have. Some of them are gonna have probably one or two extra steps, but it's not gonna be a lot much. But most of them have this same process. So the first part is recruiter screening, which is when the recruiter talks to you, tries to get an idea of your skills, what you can do, what you cannot do, the English level, things like that. And it's basically getting to know you. At that point, probably you're not gonna still talk with someone within the company by itself, but it's to give you an idea, and it is most likely to help you improve your CV, adapt some things. Okay, so then you're gonna jump into the technical interview. The technical interview, on the other hand, has two parts, or could have two parts depending on the company. The first one, it's to just check, like imagine if it's as a background check, where you're gonna be tested on your basic knowledge, be that back end, front end, whatever you handle. And then the other option that could be included, it's a take-home assignment, where they give you a task, and it's the same thing. Probably it's most of the times nowadays is through a platform where you are gonna be able to develop a small piece of code and a small solution to showcase how you work. And we're gonna talk about that because there are some things that you have to pay attention there to be able to succeed, to do it correctly. Okay. Then there is another step that this is not required for every role, but could happen to some of their roles, specifically or mostly for the mid-levels and senior level roles, where you have a system designed interview. Okay, now I'm gonna explain in detail in a second what that is. But just before jumping into that, to complete the typical interview process, then just jump into a behavioral or cultural fit interview, which could be also just an interview with someone in the company. With startups specifically, most of the times that could be an interview with the CEO of the company or someone in a high-ranking place, to understand if you like each other. That's something that changes from the typical Latin American interview when it comes to the companies we know. That you have to like both. Oh, it has to go in both directions. I mean, so for example, if it's not only like, hey, they like you as a professional, you also have to like them as a company, and you have to ask questions about that as well, because the idea is to have probably a long-term relationship, and you have to understand each other to get along with the people you're going to be working with. So take that into account when getting to that level. And most of the times after those 4 stages, then you get the final offer and you decide if you want to get into the company or not. Okay. So let's talk about coding interviews. What are the things that you probably are gonna expect or you're gonna find in those? You're gonna talk about data structures, things that you probably saw back in your university years. And why that's important? Because those things on a mid or senior level are really important to solve advanced problems. Um, I have heard a lot of people saying, like, no, that's something I'm not gonna ever use again. That's only for the academic degree or something like that. No, it does solve things. So, just to give you an example, think about queues, which is the data structure that you used on the first year of your career. Uh, and nowadays, you can also use queues and stacks on a bigger scale, let's say in AWS, to solve concurrency issues. So you to be able to move up that ladder and understand those things at that level, you have to remember the clear concepts at the beginning. Okay, so my first recommendation for that: go back to the basics, check that information, check not something like really advanced, because I guess you already saw those back in the day, but at least a refresher to remember, okay, how do I handle a linked list? How do I handle a graph? How do I handle a binary tree? Things like that. Okay. I could add a link to some of those general structures that are normally getting included into these kind of interviews. The same goes for algorithms. Go do like a refresher, a basic check on algorithms. Once again, nothing too complex, but something that can give you an edge, that can help you showcase that you know what you are doing. Okay. On the platform things, where you can practice this, those are the you're seeing LeetCode, HackerRank, CodeSignal. Those are some of the most known ones, or some of the most common ones, but anything works that let you practice a little bit and get you some results. My personal preference probably is HackerRank. I do like them more, but I know a lot of companies ask for LeetCode. Anything works, because at the end of the day, it's the same idea. It just gives you some example problems or exercises that you can work on, and then you have to execute the test. Think about optimization. That's one of the things I'm gonna touch on in the next subject, because it's if you are able to solve the problem just like on a basic level, kind of like saying, okay, it works, it executed. That's one thing, and that's good. But you're not gonna get like the best solution, or you're not gonna get the best grade if you don't think about optimization. For example, what happens when you try to execute the same function, the same piece of code against not 10 records, not 100, but 5,000 records? What happens? Does your code still works, or does it hangs? It takes too long. How you can solve the same thing with a different approach, with a different algorithm maybe. Okay, so that's when you have to connect to this other subject, which is Big O notation. If you haven't heard that, because that's one of the things I know not all universities in Latin America teach, the Big O notation is the one that allows you to understand the complexity level of an algorithm. Okay, so it can be linear, it can be geometrical, it can be logarithmical. If you don't know that, not an issue. Before going to interview, research a little bit on that, understand that. It's not complicated. But once you understand that, you're going to be able to optimize. So you're going to be able to analyze this function the way it is. It has a big O notation of, let's say, O at n, of x at the power of n. That means it's geometrical. It's not the best one. As you give more data to it, it's going to grow in time. That's going to be an issue. So how I can convert this to maybe a linear or a logarithmical algorithm. That's how you optimize that. And if you can explain that, it's going to be way better. Because in technical interviews, probably they're going to ask you, hey, please solve this, how you can do it. And then after giving a simple solution, a easy solution, then you can jump and say, hey, okay, this works, but now let's analyze this. Or they are going to tell you, ask you like, okay, if you think about big O notation, how complex is this? And then you are going to be able to understand and say, oh, I think we can upgrade this and change it to a lower level to take less time. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Okay, let's talk about how to approach coding problems. So there are some things that you can do. You don't have to do it like specifically or 100% like this, but this is our recommendation to get it in the best way possible and like in the clearest way possible. First of all, think about all of the things that you probably have read about: clean code, pragmatic approach. All of that, it's really useful. It's something that's gonna help you. But going back to the basics, what you need to do, if it's a live coding interview where you have to be alongside someone on having a problem that you have to solve, first of all, clarify the requirements. So read them all. If there's something that you're not completely sure, do not assume anything. That's not a good idea. If you're not clear about something, ask as many questions as you need. I try to get more information from the recruiter or the interviewer. Obviously, it doesn't mean that you have to be asking for every little detail, but to try to be as clear as possible. Once you have a really good understanding of what you need to do, it's gonna be easier first of all, and also it's gonna show that you're trying to get to the core problem, or you're trying to have a clear idea of what needs to be done. That's also interesting to see in the process. Okay, the other part, it's talking through your logic. And what does that mean? It means that you shouldn't be like trying to be typing all the time, trying to code all the time, but you should also be explaining like, okay, I'm gonna be doing this because I think this is a solution, or I'm trying to do this to achieve X result, or to do a Y thing. Okay, why that helps? Because it also shows what's your train of thought mainly, and also it's going to allow the interviewer to guide you or to understand what you're doing. Sometimes that can shorten the interview, or can help the interviewer give you some clues. Okay, obviously, if you are able to solve it on your own, it's going to be better, but it doesn't mean that if you ask questions or if you need some clarification, it's going to be a bad thing. It's better to show that you're trying to communicate. Remember, after all the coding work that we do, we need to do it in a team. We're going to be doing it in a company, so we need to communicate. That's why I was highlighting that at the beginning, because it's something important to be able to communicate your ideas, to communicate with other people. That's how you're gonna work. Okay, the third option, or the third level, is to write a brute force. I mean, like I was saying a bit before, create the simplest solution, and then think about how to improve on top of that. Okay, let's say you first come up with one algorithm that gives you the option, and then you analyze it using big O notation and say, oh, okay, this is gonna work, but it's gonna be slow, or it's gonna have problems as the number of records grow, or the number of requirements are bigger. Then I'm gonna think about options of how to optimize this, and that can allow you to create a new function with other options, or to change the algorithm altogether. And once again, it shows that you're thinking about that. You're thinking long term. You're thinking about ways to get a better solution. And why it's better to write the brute force approach first, because at least with that, you're gonna get that second chance, because otherwise you're gonna spend too much time trying to get it like perfect at the beginning, which is complicated, and it might end up working against you, showing like, oh, okay, you took 30 minutes, you were trying to do it like the best way, but you ended up with nothing. So it's better to start with something small and then iterate on top of that and begin improving that. Okay. And finally, test your solution out loud, meaning talk once again, explain what you're seeing, what you're getting from the solution, and if something breaks or if something doesn't work, also say why you think that's happening. Or if you already know, like, oh, okay, this is failing because I forgot to do this, or I needed to add X, Y, Z option. Okay, that's the other element. So now let's talk about the way to explain things or to simplify things whenever you're trying to solve any problem, really, and not only when it comes to coding interviews. I'm gonna be talking about the STAR method, or the STAR methodology. Okay, so the STAR methodology is related to these 4 elements, where you have the situation, the task, and the action. Yeah, and what you need to do in there is to approach any problem first, establishing what's the situation, what's the thing that you need to solve, which is connected to what I was talking a little bit earlier. For example, in this case, it's related to coding, and you have an API that needs a rate limiter. Okay, you need to limit the number of requests that are being sent to the API. Okay, so that's the situation. The task, what I need to do to be able to obtain that solution. Okay, that in this case, the task, I'm gonna put a limit to the API calls using the IP to identify each person or each client that is making requests to this API. Okay, so we have that a lot, like that second level. I have a clear idea, then I try to find a solution or define a solution to solve that issue, and finally I implement that. I jump into action. Okay, and how I'm gonna do that? Because it's not simply that I'm gonna put I'll limit per IP, where I'm gonna store that, and I'm gonna use a database, I'm gonna use some extra layer, what I'm gonna do. So that's action. In this case, I'm gonna use a queue-based sliding window to be able to send all the requests into that queue and associate that queue to the IP, so that I know if there are no pending requests on that queue. Okay, and the result, which in this case would be connected to what I said before, the test, where you can explain out loud what happened. You want to be able to say, hey, with this approach of using the queue to limit the API calls per IP, I finally implemented the rate limiter, and the system is able to handle 3 times more traffic than before. Okay, I think you probably get the idea, where you have to establish what needs to be done, how you want to do it, specifically with what's the approach or which elements you're going to be using, and finally explaining the result, the end result that you're going to see. Okay, now let's pause for a second, but we are going to be talking about design system interviews. Okay, and one last thing that you need to pay attention to is APIs. How do APIs work? What kind of APIs do you know? How do you relate to each other? What are the strong or the weak points for each one? So if you have done that in the past, it's not going to be an issue. If you have worked with APIs in your past, it's going to be pretty easy to handle. But just like with the rest of the things, try to check previous concepts, try to go over some of the things that you have handled in the past, or go through over some of the basic concepts, and then you're gonna be able to handle this quite easily. So just check this list, check the subjects that are in here, and try to do a refresher as well on these ones. Okay, now let's think about how to use the same structure that we talked about before, the STAR methodology, to handle, in this case, the system design. Okay, now let's try to apply the same idea, the same concept that we talked about before, but the STAR methodology, but now focusing on systems designed. Okay, so how are going to apply that to this kind of interview? The first thing is to clarify the requirements, just as we did before with the coding problems. Ask questions, try to understand the whole scope of the problem, the limitations called constraints, and what's the expected behavior. Once again, like I said, try to communicate, keep talking with the person, not just to talk. Not to just and keep talking without stopping, but to have enough information so that you can give a clear and complete answer as possible. Okay. Then try to identify the core components. What are going to be the elements that are going to be included in the solution? Try to split that system into logical parts and explain what each part does and why it needs to be included in there. Okay. The other option is to try to explain the trade-off, the usual pros and cons about what you're proposing, because obviously it's something quick that you're doing. You're not gonna get like the perfect solution at that moment, but you're gonna be trying to do your best at that time. And some things that it's gonna depend on the company, or if you can propose something, at least I prefer to do that. You have the ability to sketch something quickly, because you don't have whiteboard or a blackboard at hand to do that. Normally you can use a similar tool, be that Miro or Jamboard, whatever. It's available for you to have some support or some elements to explain in a better way your idea. Okay, so if we connect that to the STAR methodology in system design, let's go back to those 4 elements, which is the situation. In this case, for this example, it's the login service is slow. We're trying to get our users to log in, and it's taking ages to get a response. Sometimes it never even answers back, so we are getting a bad rap between our users. Okay, so that's what you have to solve. How you fix that issue that the login service is slow. Then your task, how you plan to accomplish that improvement by increasing the performance of the login service. In the action, how can you improve that? Obviously, this means that you previously have explained the options, have asked questions to understand how that was implemented. If is it hosted in AWS? Is it using which database, what is the size of the database, what are the elements included. Okay, that's your task, to ask as many questions as needed to understand what's the possible solution, what's the outcome needed, to see what can you integrate into that solution to give a better answer. Okay, in this case, the action, I know that one of the problems is the database is too slow, and we are getting always the same queries back to the database. So one thing is to add a Redis cache to store some of that data it's coming back and forth, and instead of just going back to the database, I'm gonna keep it in that cache, which is, in this case, Redis is in-memory key value per storage. So even though I know it's not only meant for caching, it can be a quick and easy solution for caching. Okay, and also I'm presenting as a solution to do some horizontal scaling. So you're adding more servers to this solution. Okay, and what's the result? It's gonna be 50% faster, no downtime during a load test, meaning that you're gonna establish a test that's gonna be sent every time you do a deployment, for example, or every time that there's some new feature being rolled out. That's a way to answer one of these questions. Okay, this is just an example of how you would handle normally one systems design interview. So for example, you have a whiteboard where you can begin drawing the things that you want to be using. For example, let's say I'm gonna be adding a database in here. Depending on the task, obviously, let's say we're talking about that login system. I'm gonna be trying to explain all the elements that I'm gonna be including. This is gonna be the internet. That I'm gonna plan that I'm having one load balancer in here. Sorry about the mistake in there. Load balancer. Sorry about my letter as well. It's not the prettiest right now, but you get the idea in general, which is what I'm trying to achieve in general, just to understand what needs to be included whenever you are working on an interview like this. Okay, so you say that the load balancer is connected to the internet, and you have, let's make it quick, like you have at least 3 different web servers, and the load balancer plays within this one, and it's using round robin scheme to be able to balance the information or the request between the different servers, and that maybe you're gonna be making an enhancement in here, and in the middle you're gonna be putting be that Redis cache or a Memcache server in here to handle the communication between the web servers and the database. So let's try to put this in here and make it work like that. So everyone goes to the cache before going to the database, and this is connected obviously to the clients that are using either their cell phones or their computers. And let's say that this is my initial answer, and then I could also say that before going in here, if let's say I did wanted to get PDF creation with a lot of information that gets taken from the database, and that's not something that's going to be able to be done immediately, then I'm gonna say let's alter something in here. I'm gonna remove the database from here just to have some space. And I'm gonna say that I'm gonna be adding an SQS service from AWS in here, so that whenever a PDF request comes here, it is gonna be first be queued, and depending on the this other server that handles the the PDF. It's gonna be reading information from the queue, and then you're gonna get the resources. And actually, this is the one that it's really going to hit the database. Okay, it's obviously just a simple example. It's not perfect. It's not even real, but it gives you an idea of what kind of questions can they do, and how would you present it. As you can see, it's just scraps of information. It's just drafting, so nothing too fancy, but having all of the concepts pretty clear about how to connect everything, how to put everything in place. Okay, so just that. So if we jump into what the other part of the interviews include, for example, in this case, the behavioral interviews, some typically common questions that they can include: conflict resolution, for example, how do you handle disagreements with the team members or the stakeholders, especially, once again, this goes to the senior levels. Or if we talk about real life, if you have working in big projects, it's most likely that you already have dealt with this, with a problem that was included in your team and you needed to solve. Then how did you solve that? How did you get through that and achieve the result that you wanted, and without having an argument with your team members? Or if you had an argument, how you were able to get out of that. Okay, so that's important for the company to understand that you are able to work in a team, that you can resolve a conflict. Okay. Another common question, it's about your mistakes and how do you handle them. And the biggest idea, the biggest concern in this is that you can show that you're able to learn from your past mistakes. Okay, so that's the idea, that you're able to go back and say, oh, okay, if I could go back in time, I would change this. I would do this differently because now I know what's the right way to do it. I learned how to improve that. I learned how to deal with conflict. I learned how to handle bad documentation, to put an example, but you get the idea. The other part, questions about taking on ownership, to show that you're able to have initiative by yourself, to propose new things, to say, hey, I know that's not what was asked for me in this task, but I do think that for the business, we could do this. That's one example. Obviously, it's not a silver bullet, but to show that you care about what you're doing and that you can think beyond the limits that are given to you. Especially for companies that are growing, they're gonna be paying way more attention to people like that. Okay, and once again, the last part is about working in teams, being able to handle asynchronous work. In this case, for example, asynchronous work means being able to, despite task that you have normally at your house, or the distractions that you could have at home, you are able to deliver without having someone always looking over your shoulder, like, oh, okay, are you working? Have you done this? Have you done that? Because you're probably not going to be working at the same time zone. Like, as I said before, it's a different culture. So it's pretty different to what a lot of people in Latin America are used to, that is just having someone always watching or trying to say, hey, go ahead, you have to finish that, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's completely different when you work remotely. So that's going to be important for the companies that are willing to hire someone to work in a remote environment. And just like a final tip, some things that I would recommend: be clear, not fancy, meaning you don't have to make up anything. You don't have to try to show that you're like the most intelligent person in the room. You show that you are able to do things, that you are capable, and without any decorations or trying to show that you're better than the rest of the crowd. I mean, to some extent, yes, you have to be sure of yourself. You have to be confident, and that's something I've seen in the past with some candidates from Latin America. We have what we call like the imposter syndrome. That, oh no, I'm not gonna be enough. I'm not gonna be able to do that. Um, People from the US are going to be better than me. People from Europe are going to be better than me. And no, that's not real. We are just as capable. We can do the same things, and we can learn the same things. So it's like that's a complicated part that you have to be pretty sure, you work on your self-esteem, but without crossing the line and being a jerk. That's simply put. Okay. The other thing is okay to say I don't know. It's okay to say no, I haven't done that. It's way better if we are talking about American companies to say I haven't done this. I would like to research that, or I want to learn that, but at this point I don't know that specific part, because that sets a limit and shows that you are respectful and that you're honest, rather than trying to make something up. So don't do that. Don't try to say something you don't know. Connected to what I said before, don't undervalue your soft skills. Try to put some support on that. That you're capable to manage a team, that you're capable of talking to people, things like that. A piece of advice: practice mock interviews. There's even now tool from Google that allows you to practice an interview. You just tell it that the kind of role you're applying to, and you can having ask questions, or even nowadays with all the AI stuff, you can ask. You can put in your cell phone, be that ChatGPT or Gemini, in voice mode, and say, hey, I want you to help me to practice for interview for a company in the US with these characteristics, and it's gonna make up a dialogue that you can have with that. So that's gonna help. And the final thing, like always keep your GitHub and your LinkedIn up to date, because as you move, that's gonna open up more opportunities. So remember to always work on those two things. Some of the problems or the common mistakes that you can run into, and probably it's better to avoid them, is do not try to over-engineer answers. Like I said, start with something simple that is like brute force, and that it's gonna give you a solution, and then on top of that, begin upgrading it, improving it until you have the time. Because obviously those interviews are going to be probably 1 hour, or in some cases even 2 hours, but that's not common. So you have to try to make the best of the time you have. Okay. Another thing to avoid is keep staying quiet during the interviews. Whenever you don't know something, or if you're thinking, in this case, it's not a good idea to keep quiet while you're having that interview. For example, if you're working on the system design part and you are still unsure about something, say so. Say, okay, I'm thinking about how to solve this. I'm trying to include this. That allows the interviewer to understand how you think, and also shows that you're not just hesitating because you don't know the answer. It shows that you're trying to find the better solution or the better answer. Okay. Obviously, the other error is not practicing English enough and thinking that just with the things that you use for a trip to the Caribbeans, or I don't know, to anywhere in the world where you just use English to order a drink is enough. No, you need to practice to be able to communicate clearly. You don't have to be super fast, but you have to be able to express your ideas clearly. Okay. Another mistake is forgetting to ask clarifying questions. That's something pretty common. It's not a problem. It's not an error to ask questions. Go ahead, keep asking until you get the response or the information you need to give a better answer. Okay, and the last thing is ignoring the behavioral preparation, which is understanding also how to deal with conflict, how to work in a team, those kind of things that I explained before. But other than that, I don't think there's too much to delve into when it comes to the common mistakes. As a final note, I know this can feel intimidating, especially when you're doing it on a second language, which is not your main language. You're from your country, and maybe you don't have anyone around that has done this in the past. So it's your first time. You're afraid. You need to have more information. But listen, you don't have to be perfect. That's the first thing that I want you to keep in mind. You just have to keep showing up. Maybe you're not gonna get it on the first time or the first attempt, but if you keep learning, if you keep trying and practicing, you're gonna get better, and you're gonna be improving a little bit each day, and believing that you deserve this opportunity, that you belong in these rooms or in these companies, because you do. You actually do. Whether you get it, you get your first job or the fifth job, keep going. These are the companies that are out there looking for someone that is exactly like you. So take a deep breath, take care of yourself, and remember, no stress. You're not behind. You're on the right track. You're on your way. And going back to Spanish, no estás solo en esto. Te prometo que vale la pena el esfuerzo. Vamos con todo. Você não está sozinho. Eu garanto que vale a pena. Vai com tudo.